guys, welcome back. We are on part 15. Can you believe it? We are going to continue with this epic ball jointed doll series. All right, we have our pieces of and parts of the doll that we've sculpted out of the air dry clay, and I tried to send them as best I could. I feel like I probably should have sent them more after I finished everything, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, let's just say you should try to send them as much as possible. Get them as smooth as you can without any ridges or gaps or holes or cracks or whatever. That will make this foundation coating process that we're going to be doing in this video a whole lot easier. But let's talk about foundation coating. So the book lists two different types, the beginner version and the advanced. This is the beginner product you could use. It's a modeling clay. I use Liquitex just because Liquitex is a good brand. And they say mix it with gesso. And I bought these and I was going to do it and I thought about it. And then I thought, no, not going to do it. I want to do the advanced version because I'm crazy like that. I'm going to do the traditional Japanese version, which is using gofun. This is the gofun that I found. It's supposed to be a good quality. There are very many different qualities of gofun. You know, I think they say the ones in the box are good. I don't know. I can't read the Japanese, but it looks good. Gofun is a dried oyster shell and clam shell mixture that has been pulverized, and then it's in these little shards in the box. And this is a traditional coating that has been around since antiquity. I don't know how long ago, but since antiquity, we'll say. Originated in Kyoto, Japan. And there are many gofun dolls. You can actually do a search for gofun. But this type is supposed to be a good brand. I found this from a shop in England. Actually, had to order it online. Not something you're going to find traditionally in America. But now that I've used it, I'm really interested in it, and we'll talk more about that as we go through the process. But you mix it. For this process, we're going to use wood glue. The traditional version uses a glue that's made out of the hide of animals, I believe, and the book talks about it. If you have the book and you're interested in that sort of part, you can look at that. But I didn't really want to get into that traditional glue because it's very temperature sensitive. You have to keep the bowl in warm water while you're working on it to keep it from hardening too quickly, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. I mean, you know, I am going to go traditional, but I'm not going to go that traditional. There's a limit to my torture. But anyway, I think that this was a good choice. As we go through this, I'll tell you why. But what you need to mix this with is you're going to need a good mortar and pestle. And this was a good size. I got this one on Amazon. And you have to crush the little shards of the gofun into a fine powder. You can buy gofun that's already powdered. Not easy to find, but you know, yes, you can. And you can find videos on how to do this on YouTube also. I don't go to the extremes, but the traditional version is a little lengthy. Now, I set this up because we're going to have to dry our different pieces and parts. And for the hands and the feet that have the little hook, I made these these are actually just wooden skewers that I put some taped paper towel around to make a stopper so it doesn't slide all the way down. But the version that the book uses is a straw that they've bound together, and they stick the skewers down into the straw. But we don't have that here in America either, so we're going to be using leftover styrofoam. But basically what you're trying to do here is have something that you can dry the pieces on after you put the gofun on. So what I did is just ball up some paper towel, and here I'm making a hand gesture to show you that we don't have the straw version that you would stick the sticks down into. We're going to be using the American version, which is the styrofoam block. But anyway, I had this left over from when I made the dolls, and I thought it was the perfect thing to use. So I've prepared all these sticks so that they're ready to go. Once we start putting the gofun on, we want to have them ready. So I have this one with kind of a clunky piece of the paper towel tape pad for the head, and then I actually not molded, but I cut one out of cardboard for this top part because that was going to be kind of hard to get it to balance on something. So I cut that out and made that so that I can stick that in there and dry it. So I want to have all this prepared ahead of time so you're ready when you're going to start putting the gofun on. You want to have all this done. You don't want to have to do this because the gofun tends to harden fairly quickly, I will say. So if you've never worked with this product, I'm going to say that this is a really unique product. It sort of dries to a porcelain-like finish. It is extremely hard, so much harder than I imagined, which is kind of interesting because it makes it so that you have a really good foundation for your doll. Now I did buy these paintbrushes. They're very soft, and I got them with the straight edge, not curved, because that will work best for putting the gofun on. The book says use a air gun, to apply the gofun, but I didn't want to do that because I'm just not very comfortable with that. I tend to get mine clogged up even with just paint, so I figured I would just try painting it on, because at this point I was thinking, oh, I can just sand off any ridges or whatever that are left from the brush strokes. We'll talk about that later too. But anyway, yeah, soft brushes with soft bristles, very, very important because you don't want to leave brush marks. And yeah, have everything prepared so that you're ready to go, because once you start putting the gofun on, we're going to have to put 4 to 5 coats, and you want to be able to have them dry without touching anything. So that's the purpose of the styrofoam block and all those skewers with the paper towel tape. And we're ready to go now. So, all right, so we're going to take our gofun and we're going to put it in this, a little bit of it in the mortar and pestle, and then we'll mix it with the wood glue, and I'll show you the process. I'm not going to really the extent of the traditional process, I'll tell you. I don't know. Sometimes I think things just are more traditional than useful, so I'll show you what worked and what didn't. So we're just going to start out. I have no idea how much of this to use. I've never done this before. This is an adventure, one of those artistic adventures that we do here. But basically, you just want to grind this into this fine, 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 fine powder. You want it as fine as possible, because when you start mixing it with the glue, you don't want it to be grainy. You want it to be something that will mix into a really smooth paste. So I think I had too much in here, and probably I would say do it in batches. Do a little bit at a time, because it as you're grinding it down, it sort of sticks to the bowl and you have to scrape it off. I was using my metal clay tool here to do that, and just had to keep scraping it off and then grinding it. Then according to the directions, you're supposed to just slowly start adding the wood glue and stirring more than grinding. You're not really grinding, you're stirring with the mortar and pestle. But it is kind of a good thing to use because it kind of helps to mush the glue into the particles of the gofun. And you want to just keep doing it until the gofun sort of balls up and starts sticking to the pestle. Wait, which one's which? Mortar, pestle, mortar. Anyway, the thing you're stirring with. And when it starts doing that, that's when it's got enough glue in it. And then you can pick it up and start kneading it. and you want to knead it really well. You want to really get the glue mixed well into the gofun. Now there's a process that they called, I can't remember the Japanese term, but it was like 100 strikes is what it meant. And it meant throwing this down into a bowl 100 times, and that was to make sure that the glue had penetrated all of the gofun. But for me, I maybe did it, I don't know, 10, 20 times. I didn't do it 100 times. But you do want to wash your bowl, your mortar and pestle out as soon after this as you can, because this stuff hardens really quickly, and it hardens into a very, very hard thing. And you can see me trying to do this 100 thing. Yeah, I didn't do it 100 times. I did it a few. I did it maybe 20. I don't know. After you get it really well mixed, then you're supposed to sort of make a snake out of it, and I ended up transferring over into this smaller bowl because you're going to be pouring hot water in, and I didn't want to have to pour all that much hot water. So I just heated up my tea kettle. You want to pour hot water in it and let it soak a while, and this is to get the impurities out. And so I did that a little bit off camera. You did start to see some yellow come out of it, and this is the watercolor paints that I purchased. They're Winsor Newton, which is supposed to be a good brand, and I've used their oil paint, so I'm going to be using that to color. Now, I wanted to say that some of this is what I saw on a video from a translated Japanese YouTube about how to do some of this stuff. So as I went through it, I sort of made my own adjustments. But you do want to have something to dry your pieces with, and that much is true. So for right now, I'm just going to set all these up, put all the little padded skewers into my pieces, get ready. And then what you want to do is wet a paper towel till it's damp. And then you want to just rub all the surfaces of your pieces. And this is just to remove all the sanding particles and sort of remove some of the strands of the air dry clay that may be still there, sort of smooths it out and get it ready for the preparation of the foundation coating. So once you have all that, you can just let those dry. And then this is what it was saying to do in the video. It was like, you put the gofun in this big bowl and mesh it with your finger, and then you mix the paint with it. But the thing was, that just wasn't going to work for me because of how I'm going to be mixing the paint. I don't know, it just didn't work for me. So I set that aside, although for some reason I decided I needed to continue to focus on that bowl for the rest of the video. But yeah, you just want to put a small amount of your watercolor into the gofun to make a flesh color. And this first coat, I will say I made way too dark. It's just way too tanned of a color. But I did end up putting multiple coats on, so I was able to tone down this color. You might think it doesn't look too dark in the video, but actually it looked way too dark. And because you're going to be putting some coloring on the face and everything and blushing the doll, I think a lighter color was much more appropriate. And I really do apologize for some reason I got so excited, I think, about using the gofun and doing something different that I just kept focusing on that bowl for some reason. And I did manage to get a little bit of the coating process on the side of the screen there. So sorry about that. Anyway, sometimes I just get excited and I'm not looking at the viewfinder to see how well framed up my video is. So anyway, now I'm just putting coat of the gofun on. It goes on actually pretty well. Thought it went on pretty smooth. They did suggest using a oil paint strainer to strain this, and that might be a good idea. I don't know. I was able to kind of smooth out any of the little tiny lumps and also kind of sand those out, so I didn't use the strainer for it. But the other part of it is that the gofun tends to start drying out pretty quickly, so it starts to get thick. I did have to add water to it to keep it thin enough to paint on as I went along with all these different pieces. But basically, I'm just coating all the pieces, then letting them dry on my little styrofoam drying rack. And I think the things that are important to remember here are to try to have enough of one of the color that you mix to do all of the pieces, because you want the skin tone to match. So that was another thing I learned. I mean, honestly, I'm doing this for the first time, so I did learn a little bit as I went. And I learned about how much gofun I needed to coat all of the pieces. So I would mix up a batch and do a coat before I would have to switch and mix up new, because you don't want to have two different colors. It didn't really matter too much on the first go round because I knew I was going to be covering it up. So I did have to mix a second batch to do that. But from then on, I was mixing enough of the gofun and paint to coat all of the pieces before I had to mix up a new batch of gofun and paint. So once you get all of the pieces there, you're going to just set them up on your styrofoam and let them dry. And that styrofoam block worked pretty well. All my little hanging pieces, I had the feet and the hands hanging on the sides. That worked well too. You also do not want to get too much of that gofun into those metal hooks that we put into the hands and feet, or you're going to gunk it up and they won't be able to move. Because I'm telling you, when this gofun dries, it is hard as a stone. Actually, I think it's harder than a stone. Like, I think I could sand a stone. This was so hard to sand. So I can get why the book was saying to use an air gun to airbrush. What is it called? Air gun, airbrush. Yeah, I have one. I don't like using it. It always gets gunked up. It's kind of more of a pain in the ass. But there's times when it's really useful to put on a really, really, really smooth coat of something on a doll that I need to do, especially if I'm doing like a darker skin doll that I need to cover up the white skin of a blank doll. But for this, I just don't see how this was going to go through. Not the one that I have anyway. Maybe if it had a little bit bigger head on it, that it would go through, thicker stuff would go through it might work. But I didn't want to buy a whole new one for this project. So for this, since it's my first one, I'm just going to use the brushes. And they worked reasonably well. I think having a soft bristle brush is really the key. You don't want to have something that leaves a lot of brush marks, because you would, you want to eventually be able to sand all this out. So basically what I did is I put 3 coats of gofun on. Initially, I let it dry overnight, and then I came back and did a whole bunch of sanding and tried to get rid of some of the ridges. And then I put 2 more coats of gofun on, and then I ended up having to sand more. But that was the overall process, was to put 3 coats, do some sanding to get rid of the ridges, and then do some more gofun. And as I did this, I was able to lighten the skin tone quite a bit. I realized after I did all the pieces that I hadn't done the body, the torso. So I did all of the legs and the hands and everything, and I forgot the torso. So I ended up coming back and doing 5 coats on that all at one time, and got that one coated. And I didn't do the sanding in between on it, but you can see there's a lot of little nooks and ridges like in the openings. And I did put the gofun inside of the openings because I'll tell you why in a minute. But what I'm showing you here is I found this pack on Amazon. It's like sandpaper that goes from 400 grit to 3,000. There's like a couple of each, but they're the foam sanding pads, and they're really nice. So I was able to get that, so I thought I'll start with, maybe 400 and then go up. So what I do is I cut it in strips and then I label them as I cut them so I can remember which one's which, and start with the 400. So yeah, going back to why you want to have the gofun inside of the holes where the joints are going to go is this gofun is so freaking hard, and it offers a lot of support to this air dry clay. The air dry clay can be a little bit porous. Now here is this was like a little nodule that was on there, and that's too hard to sand down. So you can just use your X-Acto and scrape off the nodule and then sand it down. So any big lump area, you can use, you're going to just have to do that, because I'm telling you, this stuff is so hard. Like NASA should use this on rocket ships, really. I think it would be impenetrable. But yeah, you want to make sure both the ball of the joints and the inside holes of the joints are well sanded. It makes it very smooth because the gofun kind of dries to a matte finish, and when you sand it, it's going to be a lot more smooth. Now here's a little tip for you. I was sanding this and I chipped off a piece of the nose on the face. So I want to show you a little tip about how to repair things, because these things happen, right? This is not a perfect world. So I wanted to mix up a little bit more gofun to repair this, since the gofun is so strong. And I knew I would be doing this in probably coats, so I just did a small amount of the gofun. I didn't go into doing the big lump and throwing it down and all that. I did a little piece, and I kneaded it really, really well with my fingers. And then I just added a little bit of water and mushed it up to make a paste. And I think, this is going to repair this better than trying to do it with air dry clay, because the clay is really just not that strong, and it's a little bit brittle. And that's why the nose broke, because there just wasn't a lot of the gofun on it when I was trying to open up the nostril with the X-Acto knife. So I just cracked it open. So what we're going to do is just do a tiniest little bit of watercolor paint. I'm using a toothpick. That's how small of amount you need. Just a tiny little bit of red and a tiny little bit of yellow to get just a touch of a flesh tone. You don't want it to be too dark. It won't look good if it's too dark on the doll. All right. So I mixed up some of the gofun, and I wanted to start out with it being a little bit on the more like a syrup or a cream soup consistency, and then I knew that as I let it harden, it would be easier to build up. So here I'm just using a metal tool to make sure I have the nostril patent, and then we're going to just slowly build it up. So I had a crack actually that ran up the nostril too. So I'm going to be filling in that crack on the nose, and then also I have to build up around the part that fell off around the nostril. So I'm filling in the crack first with the more liquid version of the gofun. We'll let that dry. We're going to have to put several coats on to get it to where we need it to be. Initially, we won't be able to build up the part that cracked off, but I wanted to fill in that crack that ran up the nose first. You can use this technique for any of the areas you had that, if you had a hole or a scratch or a place that you need to fill in, you can always go back and do this version to repair it. Okay. The other thing I did is I added gofun to the inside, because there's going to be a lot of stress on this hole. This is where the elastic is going to come up through the body. There's going to be a lot of stress. So I wanted to put gofun around the edges of the head because that's going to get a lot of action, both the top of the head and the bottom of the head where it's going to be going together. I think it would just be nicer to have that be a smooth gofun finish instead of that porous air dry clay finish. So I put that inside the head to give it a little bit of strength. Some of the parts of the doll, are pretty thin, so I think the gofun is going to really help support that because it's so hard. So here I'm putting on another coat that's got a little bit thicker as it's dried in that cup. I'm doing all this, over the course of, maybe 30 minutes. Now this was a place that I felt that the hole was too big for the arm. So I'm just putting some of that thickened gofun right on the edge of that one side to build it up. And I did this several times and I was able to close that opening up some. So these are things you could do. These are just some repair tips for you because, we're going to make mistakes, right? We're human. All right, so we've gotten to the point now where I think we can do the thicker gofun to sort of fix that big chunk that fell off. And I put the metal pointy tool up the nostril to be something that we can mold against, because when we do it, we can pull that out and it'll leave the hole. So that will leave the nostril open because we do want to have a nostril for our doll. You can see, yes. And I'll let that dry for a while, and then we're going to build up just a little bit more. So you can see now that this has gotten a lot thicker. It's not like cream soup anymore. It's more like sour cream. I don't know. But as you let it sit, it just hardens fairly quickly. So we're going to put the tool back up there again. And we're going to add a little bit more further down on the nose so we can make it match the other side. Now we will be able to sand this down some, so you don't have to, make it pristine, but you want to not have it too lumpy because really sanding this was so difficult. I cannot tell you how hard this was. My hands were so sore from sanding. So here we've pretty much got it back to the original state with the small nostril, and I'm just carefully trying to make the edges meld into the other dried part so it doesn't look like it's so abruptly placed on there. At some point you have to just stop and just quit messing with it because you're going to mess it up, because that's my usual mode of operation. So I got it as close as I could. At one point I just used a toothpick to put a little drop of the gofun at the very top of that hole where I was wanting to close it off just a little bit more, and that worked pretty well. So there's another tip for you. You can have a little bit of water there with your brush, and that helps to smooth out some of the edges that you need to smooth out. But anyway, that's kind of it. Yeah, gofun, real interesting stuff. I think I'm going to work with it some more. Maybe make some different kind of dolls coatings with it. But it's a real nice coating, nice smooth porcelain finish, very hard, very strong. So it's going to make a nice coating for this doll. So we have all our parts now drying. We'll do a final sanding before we start putting it together and putting some color on it. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some things. I know I did. Thanks for watching.